Good evening, afternoon, night, morning, whenever you find a way to watch or listen to this podcast. It's me, as always, Omar, joined by my good friend Jackson, who rocking the crucial catch pin, lapel pin, I think. Is that what that is? Did I get it right?
That is a crucial catch lapel pin. I found it on eBay. So
Okay, yeah. I don't usually get the NFL's marketing efforts right, the ones that you do wear, so I'm quite proud of myself. You're still missing the Ed Sheeran hat, but I mean,
that's
maybe if
not a campaign, Omar. It's not, that's not going out to my cause, my cleats, and then Ed Sheeran. Like that's not the same, man.
I mean, maybe you're waiting for it to get down to 99 cents on Fanatics, which I don't blame you. But hey, one day maybe you'll wear that hat one day. Maybe it's the Christmas gift for this year, the Ed Sheeran hat. But enough NFL. The NFL is already taking up enough college spaces as it is, as they announced a Black Friday game for next year, which I am incensed about. But life goes on. So let's talk college football, of course. The week that was. I mean, of course, Jackson, you being an SEC guy, like this week more than any other, caught I guess the spotlight for like the AC caught the eyes of the nation with, the Tennessee Alabama game that everyone talked about.
So obviously that dominated headlines on Saturday and continued to over the week. I think it's hard not to when you like take a goalpost physically out of a stadium and throw it into a river, right? Like that is certainly a reaction to a victory if I've ever seen one. I think it is interesting all the donation campaigns that you see the president smoking a cigar in his like box saying, "Hey, it's no big deal. We'll do this every year if we can beat Alabama." And then 2 days later, you turn around and ask for like $52.49 donations in honor of the score, or like $16 for the 16-year losing streak to Alabama, right? So it is a little bit interesting the reaction by the actual university, but the fan base, man, that's what college football is all about. 100,000 people, one of the biggest stadiums in the country, like all celebrating, and you can really like you can see like I've experienced that moment before, right? I mean, I don't even know. Florida's never had a rival that they've lost to that for that amount of time. So I guess I haven't experienced that before, but it was awesome to see. Definitely what college football is all about. Alabama, man, really seems to be having another down year. Bryce Young and Will Anderson, and it seems like there's not too many guys left on that roster that are like top tier level, like slam dunk top five pick guys, right? Which we typically see Alabama have a few of those guys, or at least give off the impression during the regular season that there are. So
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, Will Anderson's been quiet of this year. Kind of, I guess I want to call it the Jadavion Clowney effect, excuse me. Where like, Clowney had that great year in 2012, had like the huge hit in the Outback Bowl. And then the next year offense is kind of keyed in on him. Same thing with Will Anderson, I feel, where it's just like I'm sure he's making a great difference on defense. He's not showing the stat in the box score. But yeah, I mean Tennessee
it
Alabama was the
definitely
only
doesn't
game.
show up on the stat sheet, but I promise you it does show up on like tape, right? Where like your whole game plan is revolving around how can we not lose to Will Anderson? Look at the Sunday night game this past weekend, Micah Parsons, who might draw some comparisons, right? At least as an edge rusher. Look at how Philly changed his entire game plan revolving around Micah Parsons, right? And in this case, it was successful, but you see that more effect Monday through Friday in game planning than it does on the stat sheet.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah. So like you said, it affects game planning a lot, and I mean, obviously schools have been game planning effectively. Tennessee Bama was not the only great game of the week. I mean, you had Utah USC for the nightcap. You had TCU Oklahoma State. Just so many great ranked faceoffs. But just a great week of college football, just like one of the best ones that I can remember, honestly. You also had Harvard versus Howard, game that I was at. Howard tied the score at halftime, but it was not to be. But even still, Howard with more experience can be a force to be reckoned with in the MEAC. But again, a great weekend of college football. And from there, I think we don't really have a September Heisman. We have more of a mid-October Heisman where barring yep.
One quick thing, Omar. I'm sorry to interrupt, but don't be so humble, man. You were not only in attendance for the Howard Harvard game, you were not in the undesirable section, just in the lower bowl on metal seats. You were in the press box, full fledged, representing Harvard up there with the big boys, right?
I was, yeah, and Redshirt Sports and Shady Sports Network, but I mean the thing is there really is not I guess sort of a peasants type seat at Audi Field, home of DC United for Major League Soccer and the Truth and Service Classic, as literally every single seat is a seat back in that stadium has a seat back. So great stadium. It was a great experience. And for once for once I wrote a game recap, something I don't usually do, but it's good practice.
Hey man, that's like half of what we do. You may not write them, but we recap every week, whether it's on Bulls and Booze, whether it's on hardware. So awesome, man. That was awesome to see you up there watching. Were you able to film any all 22 for me by chance? Because HBCU and Ivy League film is very hard to come by nowadays.
I was not, unfortunately. I took pictures of all
Oh, Omar,
22s,
you're killing
but
me.
I took pictures. I took scenic pictures. But no,
Did
I
you
mean,
take the
it was great.
before and after, like right at the snap and like 1.5 seconds after the snap, what we see on the Microsoft Surface tablets on NFL sidelines, like those type
No,
pictures?
nothing
Or
like that, Jackson. I'm not
oh
on that level.
gosh,
Nothing
you
like
got me
that.
nothing.
Sorry. But I guess all jokes aside, week 6, I mean we have now I guess our mid-October Heisman front runner. I mean, I'm trying to think. I think the first time that we really had a front runner for Heisman last year was I guess the last weekend of October with Kenneth Walker against Michigan for Michigan State against Michigan when he had that monster game. I think this is the first time we have a clear front runner. Now things can change as they did last year with Kenneth Walker. But Hendon Hooker looks like the front runner. Then after that, CJ Stroud, which it's strange to say, quietly having a good year for Ohio State, but it's like they haven't faced their biggest test yet in Penn State and Michigan. But CJ Stroud having a quietly good year for Ohio State. And then for third, I have Chase Brown, a guy that, we're gonna talk a little bit about before we hit our main topic, but Chase Brown had an absolutely amazing throwback performance for Illinois. I mean, kind of willed them to victory. Well, not really willed them to victory because Tommy DeVito had 252 passing yards, had a solid game. But Chase Brown had 41 carries for 180 yards. Like you don't see running backs getting 41 carries, much less in a 2 game span. For them to get one in a 1 game span, um, for him to get those carries in a 1 game span was amazing. And Illinois looks like the front runner in the Big Ten West. They beat Minnesota, probably the only other good contending team out in that division. And it'll just be a matter of time to see if they can. I don't think they're a playoff team with that one loss to Indiana, but if they can make the Rose Bowl, their first since '07 and their second since '84.
You mentioned Hendon Hooker being at the top of the betting favorite odds, or at least the odds to win the Heisman in thought or in theory. It is interesting looking at Vegas Insider right now that CJ Stroud is the favorite. And I don't know if that says more about what the public thinks of CJ Stroud or what we think of not even Hendon Hooker, but just the final destination for Tennessee's season when they've still got a road game at Tennessee. I think a lot is riding in how they lose that game because I really find it difficult to believe that they're going to go on the road to Athens and win that game. Yes, that of course the Alabama win is probably the best victory all season, right? But we saw Alabama struggle on the road at Texas, and this is not a great Texas team, right? So, and that was without Quinn Evers for half the game nearly. So, I do find it interesting that that they put CJ Stroud at the top, but like I said, I think it speaks more to where we think Tennessee will end up at the end of the year than it does of CJ Stroud. That said, Hendon Hooker has played phenomenal. If they lose to Georgia, it's not a given that they will. I don't think it's going to be because of Hendon Hooker, but it's something that at least be notated because this isn't the end all be all like favorite, right? I think he has looked the best so far this season, but you're betting on not who would win the Heisman today, it's who's going to win the Heisman on the day of the Army Navy game.
I think that's a great point about Georgia. And something I didn't think of before I bring that up is Stetson Bennett too. Like if he, even though if I guess the perception with Georgia is Georgia, of course, is a defense driven team. But if Stetson Bennett has a lights out performance against Tennessee, then he could vault himself into that top 5 into finalist status, I think. Um, but yeah, no, that's a good point too. I guess the public's perception of Tennessee because I mean, again, like I thought, I don't think Bama's in an off year. Honestly, I'm sure people thought last year that Bama was in an off year when in a down year when they lost to Texas A&M, a Texas A&M squad that struggled. Not really struggled, but disappointed expectations early in the year. Then they lost to Tech. Then they beat Bama, and everyone thought Bama was wasn't their year. I feel like it's the same thing with this year. Honestly, I mean, but we'll see because they have tests too. I mean, they have Ole Miss. Ole Miss could legitimately beat Alabama this year. But yeah.
One quick thing related to the Heisman before we move on to our Pigskin Showdown Player of the Week to watch. Is there a Heisman moment left on the board for DJ Uiagalelei? Because I think Syracuse at home could possibly be one, but I don't know if there is enough respect for Syracuse among Heisman Bowers for it to be considered a Heisman moment. That said, a much worse Syracuse team had a Heisman moment against Lamar Jackson, right?
So I think Lamar Jackson's Heisman moment was against Florida State in that game. I think the train started moving with that Syracuse game, and it was like full speed after the Florida State game when they won 63-20 at home. And even then, that was a noon game. It wasn't even Saturday Night Football. But with with DJ Uiagalelei, I think the funny thing is like I think you mentioned last week, whether it was on the podcast or just between conversation with us, how like Clemson had been on Saturday Night Football for 3 straight weeks, and realistically they should be on for a fourth straight week because Penn State Minnesota lost a lot of its luster after Minnesota lost to Illinois. But I mean, Syracuse Clemson is one of the games of the week, honestly. At least the ESPN owned game of the week because UCLA Oregon is on Fox. But I mean, with that being said, I think you're right about Syracuse because I think DJ Uiagalelei's campaign is hurt by the fact that he played Wake Forest and NC State too early. But with that being said, like Drake May and UNC looks like the front runner out of the ACC Coastal. You could have a very electric, ACC title game, prime time on ABC. And if you remember last year, I mean, like it wasn't a given that Kenny Pickett was going to be a Heisman finalist. Before the ACC title game, what happens that final weekend? The fake slide, probably the most electric, Heisman finalist moment of any candidate in recent memory, I think. So something like that can happen where DJ Uiagalelei just lights up the scoreboard on prime time because essentially, like I think this might be a hot take, but honestly, like the ACC title game is as close to I forget what the number of the last game is for the NFL, but it's as close as a Week 18
Week
Sunday night
18,
football game.
correct.
What was that? What was the number, Jackson?
Week 18, correct. With
I guess
17
not Week
games in
18, but that's
Illinois.
like the number is I forget. There's like a number they called like game 196 or something, but you know what I mean. So like I guess I'll refresh that statement. But yeah, like the ACC title game is as close to a this is close to a like pretty much a Sunday night football game to any really to like any to like yeah to any game in college football because like again it's ABC Saturday Night Football. It only competes with one other title game I think that being the Big Ten title game, which has lagged in ratings. Consistently. That's why there's big noon kickoff. So DJ Uiagalelei on that stage could have a good game and could sneak himself into New York. As to whether he'd be the winner, I think it's hard to tell. I'm not sure how his stats compare to Hendon Hooker, but I mean, Clemson, everyone kind of wrote off Clemson, and like Geno Smith, Clemson ain't right back, but they're in the playoff talk. So
Yeah, no, they absolutely are. I don't know if there's a way for DJ Uiagalelei to win it by any means, but he certainly can sneak in the back door as a finalist, and that would be good enough, right? That counts for enough for it to be a part of for him to be a part of Clemson history for sure. I think coming off of just a big picture, right? I think him coming off of or having to fill in Trevor Lawrence's shoes, so to speak, they're very high expectations, right? But he's handled them well. He's certainly improved since last year, and he's gotten a lot of attention, right? This isn't a phenomenal Clemson team. This isn't one of the best that we've ever seen. They, like we just talked about a couple times now, they've had 3 straight Saturday night football games, and it really should be 4 straight. So, and all the eyes in the country are on that 7:30 ABC slot, right? So Certainly something to watch. But we'll go ahead. We'll move on to our HBCU Pigskin Showdown Player of the Week to watch. Omar, I'll go ahead and let you go first on this one.
Yeah, great. So I'm dressed for the occasion. I got my Red Tails Classic hat on because I am I'm talking about we know about the Tuskegee Airmen, but we have a man who is making his name on the ground for Tuskegee, and that man is Taurean Taylor. Had an absolutely electric performance in the Crampton Bowl on Saturday night. 21 carries, 232 yards, 4 touchdowns, including an amazing 93-yard touchdown against the Marauders of Central State. Tuskegee is now 4-0 in the SEAC West. That conference has a championship game, and we could be shaping up for an absolute blockbuster title game with Tuskegee and Benedict playing Veterans Day weekend with Tuskegee 4-0 in the SEAC West with a 5-2 record, and Benedict at 7-0, 5-0 in conference. The one knock on Taurean Taylor for you, Jackson, your classic statement. If he can't catch, he can't play. He only has 4 receptions on the year, but I definitely can see a player as explosive with him. Like, this game was his second 200-yard performance, and Taurean Taylor measures at only 5'7", 180 pounds. But again, that is special teams territory. Like, I mean, that's Darren Sproles, return man type territory. And again, like, that's where players in the late rounds and even undrafted make a name for themselves on special teams. And I see Taurean Taylor being a kickoff return specialist, if not in the NFL, because it's easy for players like Taylor to slip beneath the cracks, which is why the HBCU Pigskin Showdown exists and why it's just a great opportunity for those players. But I mean, I can see returning kicks, hopefully for my Generals in the USFL. But again, Coach Williams, Coach Grove, I know your games in Selma or in Marion, Alabama. If you want the local fans to come out, invite this great tailback out of Tuskegee, Alabama. The fans will flock to Marion. You'll have more money than you know what to do with, coaches.
Definitely, man. No, anytime you can be a special teams contributor, that is when you're going to get a lot of attention at the next level, right? Because you don't have 99 guys on the roster. You have 53 at the next level, right? And maybe a few more on the practice squad. So you have to be a contributor on special teams. Omar, in August, what do we always say? Playmakers on special teams in August become, it's not bench warmers, but at least like contributors, right, later on in the year, right, on special teams. And that's where, if you can pave your way on special teams, it allows you to at least have the opportunity to create your own path at the position that you're designated as on the roster. So awesome report there. I'll go ahead and go with my HBCU player of the show, HBCU Pigskin Showdown Player of the Week to watch. Jarish Halsey, the wide receiver from Delaware State. Man, he's made an impact for this Delaware State offense despite only having 15 receptions on the year. He's their leading receiver by about 180 yards, and he has as many receiving touchdowns as the rest of the team combined. Tremendous ball skills, hand-eye coordination. I do want to talk about where he fits into this offense, right? When you think of Delaware State, you think of a team who's going to try and control the clock with the run game. When they do pass, and it's not often, they only have 51 completions on the year, it's going to be explosive because it's off the play action. So yes, this is a run-first team. Don't sleep on Jarish, man. He is one of the best wide receivers in all the MEAC right now. One way that I do like how they use him, particularly in the scheme, he's almost exclusively on the outside, right? He's either lined up as the X or Z on almost every play. Because the backfield demands so much attention from that front seven on the opposing side, it's going to garner a lot of one-on-one opportunities. He's not going to go against much cover 3 where there's a strong safety or a free safety to help out. It is pretty much just him in the corner because there is so much of a deep threat that because the play action is so prevalent, that combined with him getting in and out of his breaks so well, it really creates a lot of separation on those quick little digs or hooks or curls, right? To where he can really create that separation and trust his speed to get the yak after that because of his footwork. One last thing I want to talk about with this Delaware State offense, right? Even though they are a run first team and they don't run as much 12 and 22 personnel as like run heavy FBS teams like Kentucky, like Utah that we see at the FBS level. That means he has a lot more responsibilities in the run game, right? Not something that you see that often for a 5'10 receiver. I think he's 160 pounds, right? So he doesn't hesitate to run block as well, something you rarely see off of a smaller outside receiver.
Yeah, I mean, I love that selection of Jarish Halsley for you, Jackson. I mean, last year we talked a lot about Trey Gross a lot, especially come the All-Star season when he played in not just the Tropical Bowl, but the HBCU Legacy Bowl as well. Halsley's kind of the opposite of Trey Gross. Trey Gross being a long physical receiver, Halsley 5'10", 160. It's interesting you mentioned that they play him out in the X position, not so much in the slot, because you look at a guy with those type of dimensions, excuse me, those type of dimensions, 5'10", 160, you think a slot guy. But again, like the play action game is strong with Delaware State. They're gonna run the ball. That's their calling card. They play tough defense. Like last year, their defense was tough. Not much has changed this year. They have a tough defense. They have a defense that allowed them to hang around with Delaware for a while until Delaware kind of wore them out with that. That game was only 14-3 at halftime. So Delaware State is definitely a sleeper. Like a lot of people's sexy picks for the MEAC are either the defending champs, South Carolina State, with big game Buddy Pugh at the helm, or North Carolina Central with Davis Richard lighting it up there. But I think Delaware State. I've been riding the Delaware State underdog or sleeper bandwagon for the past couple of years. But I mean, I wouldn't write them off either this year. I mean, we'll see. Like they're built to contend with teams like North Carolina Central, defense focus, ball control, get the ball to David or excuse me, keep the ball out of Davis Richards' hands and keep the game in their control. But it just makes the MEAC race even more spicy.
This week, they do have a game on the road against Howard, right? A team you saw live and in person last week. I do want to mention last year he had a 75-yard kick return. Doesn't mean he will make his mark on special teams this year. Doesn't seem like they're using him as much. I haven't seen the stats myself, so some of our draft HBCU friends might be able to help me out on that. But I mean, he'll definitely make his mark off of play action if he doesn't there, right? So looking forward to seeing him there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and again, you mentioned the game against Howard, a team that I saw last week. Howard's just a young team. Delaware State is the type of team, older, experienced to kind of wear down Howard. That's not to say Howard's a bad team, but I mean Howard just they hung around with USF, but they got outlasted in the end. And then they hung around with Howard, and then they hung around with Harvard, excuse me, and then Harvard's experience took over. So I expect the same thing to happen, but just not be a blowout. I think Delaware State pulls this one out, but yeah, I guess enough talk about our HBC. This was a really filling discussion. I enjoyed it. I guess so. We're gonna go to our Mackey Award talk. So each week we're talking about a different award each week, as the season kind of winds down. So we're talking about tight ends. And this one, I think, honestly, for casual fans, is the hardest one to pick out because the tight ends are doing the dirty work. They're not your guys averaging 20 yards a catch or like even heck 16, 17 yards a catch unless they're Isaiah Likely. But again, they're still making their mark on the offense. And there's only like I guess casual college fans, like even most college football fans, can only name a handful of tight ends, handful of starting tight ends, like right off the bat. So this one was a tough one for at least me to scout. But Jackson, I guess who's your I guess if you want to, I don't know if you want to spitfire every single one of your guys or just go one by one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can go ahead. Do you want to do all three and then all three? My prediction is included in my three, right? Just because I think he is legitimately the best tight end in the country. So it's up to you, man.
It doesn't matter to me, so I'll leave that up to you.
Got it. All right. I'll go ahead. I'll do all three. I'll go ahead and start with, I mean, this name should be at the top of everyone's list, right? Brock Bowers, the tight end from Georgia. He's a deep threat. What else can I say, man? Like you don't see that often from tight ends. It's special what he is. The classic tough for linebackers to go in coverage against him and tough for corners to be as physical as him. Whenever you have a tight end that is a legitimate deep threat and not just like a shallow cross or up the seam threat, right? Man, it can completely change your defensive game plan, especially when you run the type of personnel groupings that Georgia does. Has speed, and he can make guys miss on the outside. He's the best tight end prospect since Kyle Pitts. I know that wasn't that long ago, right? But if it hadn't been for Kyle Pitts just a couple years ago, man, he would be the best tight end prospect and long before that. So love watching him play. Really hate that we have to play him in a couple weeks here that Florida does. But man, I think he's going to win. I think he is the best tight end in the country. It just so happens to be on a team that's getting a lot of attention, right? And the reigning national champions. That never hurts. My next guy, a guy that's been getting a lot of attention in the draft world since the USC game, but really, I think for like the deeper draft world, the Jim Nagy's of the world, like have known about him for a lot longer. Dalton Kincaid, the tight end from Utah, man, he was an FCS non-scholarship player at San Diego because he only played 1 year of high school football. Now he's a super senior that's going to be preparing for the draft after this year. What I love about him, he checks all the boxes of stuff you can't coach, right? He has arm length, he has strong hands, he has those musts that you need to be a top tier tight end because he does lack a lot of experience, right? And especially Power 5 football experience. He is like a very raw talent. It's understandable, right? He wasn't even playing football his sophomore year in high school. I mean, Utah is having a great year, right? That is bringing a lot of attention to him. So I think it helps if this story that he has, this awesome story of how he has come about to Utah, if that gains some traction, it certainly can help his campaign, since a lot of these are more about storylines than tape. It'll help, but man, he is a great tight end. And looking forward to seeing him at the next level and how that translates. My last guy, Davis Allen, the tight end from Clemson. His route running is something that's very interesting to me. It is not by any means the most complex route tree that he has, but like that I don't know if you saw the highlight against FSU. He's lined up as an X receiver, runs a goal line fade on 3rd and 7. So this is an all or nothing scenario. In like tremendous, like gets 1 foot in, but then if you're looking at from an NFL perspective, right, gets his shin, so that counts as any other body part counts as 2 feet, right? So it's an NFL catch and like tremendous concentration. And apparently it's pretty common for him to line up on the outside, right? They have him lined that separated from the offensive line and even outside the numbers at times. So it is interesting to see how Clemson uses him in that offense. The only downside to that, though, there is not as much expected from him when he is lined up in the interior as an attached tight end, right? And you see that especially in his run blocking. So that's certainly something he needs to improve. Thankfully, I don't think that's a huge box to check off on the John Mackey Award voter list, right? So that certainly helps this case. One more thing from an NFL standpoint, though, that I kind of wanted to point it out. Typically, what you look at as an NFL team, hey, how was he in his freshman year? How is this going to translate immediately to our team? If you look at his freshman year as a 3-star recruit coming into Clemson, he had a 103.5 QBR when targeted, and he saw action over 15 games. So a pretty good sample size. He's being used uniquely at Clemson. More eyes are going to be on him. It's definitely something that I keep an eye on in fantasy football, right? Any sort of edge you can get for a tight end. So and man, he's got the frame as an NFL tight end, man. He's 6'5.5". He checks a lot of boxes, and looking forward to seeing him improve over the year and at the next level.
Yeah, I mean, I like your list a lot, honestly. I mean, 2 out of 3 of my list is the same. The thing with Brock Bowers too that makes him transcendent is just his contributions to the run game. And you think first, oh, there's so many great tight ends that are great blockers. No, no, no. I mean, actually, legitimately running the football. Like everyone saw his 75-yard touchdown against Kent State. He has 3 rushing touchdowns in the year. A tight end with 3 rushing touchdowns. Not just is he a front runner for the Mackey Award. I think you could even pencil him in to be a front runner for the Paul Hornung Award for most versatile player in college football. So I mean, Brock Bowers is just one of those guys that you can, flex. I guess I can kind of see him as like a Jason Kelsey. We saw the past couple games for the Chiefs where Jason Kelsey, and I mean not just past couple games, just last season as well, where Jason Kelsey takes snaps from quarterback, uses his roots as a quarterback in high school, and just runs wildcat. One of the few, I guess, teams in all levels of football that run wildcat. But I can see Brock Bowers' experiences as in the run game, kind of putting him in that role as well. As for Dalton Kincaid, huge game against USC. Really, the name kind of emerged from there. And you mentioned San Diego. San Diego, I wouldn't say they're a factory, but they've produced some good pro talent. I mean, everyone knows about the well traveled career of Josh Johnson, the quarterback for There's several NFL teams, a UFL team and an XFL team and an AAF team for that matter. Everyone knows about Josh Johnson, right? San Diego product. Reed Sinnett, a backup quarterback for the Dolphins, who's hung around in the practice squad, been with the Eagles as well. San Diego product. So they produce some guys out there in San Diego. They've had a rough year so far this year and the past year, but again, just a great football program out there in California. As for my three guys, again, the first two are the same, Jackson. Or I guess the first one is the same. Brock Bowers, of course. Not much else needs to be said with him. After that, I got Dalton Kincaid, and my one point of discussion comes from my third guy, which I have Sam Laporta for Iowa, just because of what he means for the offense. Like, if you look at how Iowa's been the butt of several jokes. This their offense has been the butt of several jokes this season. If you look at where this offense would be without Sam Laporta. And it's a funny thing to say because Laporta has not scored any touchdowns. And I'm not saying touchdowns are not an important stat, but his production is through the roof, like proportionately, because Georgia has so many other weapons, right? You can afford to take your attention off of Brock Bowers and put it towards the run game. They have a great receiving core. Same thing with Utah. Utah's got weapons like Dalton, or I'm sorry, Sam Laporta is pretty much, I wouldn't say doing it himself, but he has 30 catches for 278 yards, I believe. His 30 catches are more than the top two wide receivers in Iowa combined. Those two combining for 27 receptions. So defenses are keying in on Laporta. They're not stopping it. And again, like our Iowa tight ends, everyone knows about Iowa tight ends right now in this league. Like TJ Hawkinson, George Kittle, great tight end for the Niners. But I mean, like, I think Laporta will probably get a finalist look just because of what he means for the offense. The numbers might not be there, but I think receptions, it's comparative to Bowers. I mean, it's just not yards per catch. Like his yards per catch doesn't match Bowers and it doesn't match Kincaid's, but his production and what he means to that offense should get him a spot. And then Jackson, I have two other guys that I think they're intriguing cases. You can make the case in this new age. But before, yeah, I'll let you take it.
One more thing that I want to mention about Iowa football and then specifically the Iowa offense. I believe at one point in the year, they only had two scholarship receivers on the roster, right? Two scholarship wide receivers. That should tell you about the receiving room, at least the quality on the roster, right? With no offense to non-scholarship players. But it is certainly, it just speaks that, hey, a disproportionate amount of attention is on the tight end. That's something we saw. Think about Trey McBride, right? He was the Colorado State passing game. And I just wanted to, one, make that comparison, and two, point out how bad that Iowa receiving room is and just the lack of depth that they have, or it's not top heavy. It's only top heavy in the sense that it's one tight end kind of carrying the run game or the passing game with that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and it's funny to know. I mean, the second leading receiver is another tight end who has 9 catches for 157 yards. But again, I think Sam Laporta should get all the credit in the world for what he's doing for Iowa. Now, my two guys of intrigue, which I don't think they'll get any love for the award, but I think if we look at the award in a different perspective, then it makes sense. So I have two Service Academy guys. So I'm not doing that because of bias, but we have Kyle Patterson for Air Force, who has 3 catches for 81 yards in the year. And you look at that and it's like, yeah, it makes sense. He's in an option offense, but he has the highest pro football focus grade and the second highest run block grade of any tight end. And who has the highest run block grade of any tight end? That would be Josh Lingenfelter of Army, who has the second highest PFF grade of any tight end. And the thing is with that too is like you look at just the scheme, it's like how much I guess it's probably not a huge deal for Mackey Award voters, right? Their role in the run game, but you look at the advanced metrics and what these guys do, like how good the edge game is for Air Force and Army. I think they're worth consideration in a different light, but just the way it's conventionally, I guess the way the award is conventionally looked at, best tight end, in a receiving manner and statistically, they definitely won't get a look, but just the advanced metrics and the way that this game's going with analytics, it's an intriguing like thing to look at. How Kincaid, Dalton Kincaid, you know Brock Bowers, and Sam Laporta were not in the top five, but those two guys were. So, not saying they should be finalists, but I do think like it's they deserve credit for I mean their run blocking prowess and their obviously the way they create matchups on the field.
No, absolutely, man. Hey, I mean, a great list, right? 2/3 of your list I completely agree with, just because we have the same guys. I assume your prediction is Brock Bowers as well to end up winning the Mackey Award.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, again, because it's not just receiving. I assume that he'll get more carries, whether it's like a few more carries for Georgia, but he's gonna make an impact in the run game too, something that no other tight end can even, really say. So, yeah, I got Brock Bowers winning it, and honestly too, I will say this, like being a longtime Niners fan, Brock Bowers kind of reminds me of like a Delaney Walker, a guy that has the speed and the ability to make plays in the run game as a runner. Because I remember the Niners would run Delaney Walker on end arounds. So kind of an obscure Niner and Titans fan reference, but yeah, like the sky's the limit for Brock Bowers. I'm excited for him.
Omar, are you possibly getting the idea to make previous NFL player comparisons to a current college player by, say, watching the NFL Combine in March? Or are
No,
you in late February or
no, Jackson, no,
no? All right. Can
no.
I interest
I'm
you in
sorry.
that this year, possibly?
Maybe if we made the comparisons during the East West Shrine Bowl or the Senior Bowl where they're actually playing an actual game, then yeah. But otherwise, I'm not watching guys do drills. I'm not watching guys do
All
football
right, fair
practice.
enough. We'll get there someday, man. We're getting there. We'll go ahead and move on to our week 8 games of the week to watch. I'll go ahead and start off with one that we talked a little bit about on Bulls and Booze, an inter division matchup in the Sun Belt West, Troy at South Alabama. Man, this is the best start in like about a decade for South Alabama, right? They're 5-1, one game away from bowl eligibility. Feels weird to say that in October. Troy did start off 1-2, but they won their last 3, right? What's really interesting to me is Troy's offense. They have QB Gunnar Watson, rather. Many ranks top 25 in the FBS in both yards per game and yards per completion. So obviously, like getting the job done. But their backup quarterback, Jerry Doge, 144 less attempts, only 1 less touchdown, and 5 less picks than Watson, right? So possibly a little bit mid-season, a little bit of a mid-season quarterback battle to watch. It's not a bad problem to have, but Gunner is statistically like at the top in college football, and Jerry is right here as well. So it's interesting to watch. They also have wide receiver Tez Johnson, right, leads the Sun Belt with 22 yards per catch, and it's the 6th highest in all of the FBS. So a very explosive offense. And that's going to be going against a South Alabama defense that is a top 30 third down defense and already has 14 takeaways on the year. So what's at stake in this game, right? Winner probably wins the Sun Belt West, barring any other major upsets, and then probably faces, I'm assuming, what's going to be Coastal Carolina in the conference title game. We may see JMU sneak in there, but it's going to be an interesting game to watch. It's Thursday night football, so if I can't interest you in New Orleans, Arizona, I can in this. It's going to be 7:30 Eastern time on ESPNU.
I think Jackson, you mentioned the last point about Thursday night football. I think NFL fans are fed up, or football fans are fed up with NFL primetime games. I think they're fed up, and I think I mean this one isn't a bad matchup per se, but expectations are low. So I feel like this one will garner a lot of eyes too, especially with so much implications because we mentioned too on Bulls and Booze how South Alabama is. I wouldn't say they're a fake field goal away because I defend that decision of going for a fake field goal because it's not like UCLA had scored like 10 points up to that point and they were stopping their offense all day. UCLA had scored 29 points, so like their offense was a threat. So they were a 4th down stop away from beating UCLA and ruining UCLA's playoff hopes. But yeah, like South Alabama is very much still in the Cotton Bowl race, which is very exciting for college football fans. There's like so many like it's not the Boise States, it's not the Boise States, the trying to think of a perennial favorite that's not in it. It's not the Boise States. The usual suspects, the Houstons that are in the New Year's Six race. It's the Coastal Carolinas, the Tulanes that make this year so exciting. The Group of Five race so exciting. So I'm gonna go with another weeknight game. Excuse me. And we have Princeton versus Harvard on a Friday night, Ivy League Friday night. And last year, these two titans of college football, you go back to the 19th century, who are the blue bloods of the sport, Princeton and Harvard. These two titans went into a 5 overtime game 18-16. And that game was overshadowed by another game that went 9 overtimes that very same day in Illinois Penn State. A great game to be a college football fan. A lot of free football happening on October 23rd, 2021. But, again, that game was 18-16, and that's what you're going to see. You're going to see a lot of great defensive ball. I mean, you have Princeton playing lights out defense. The same thing with Harvard, even though Harvard hasn't really played as lights out defense, but Princeton has one of the best defense in FCS, excuse me. And then Harvard, they've played down to a lot of teams this year. They fell behind by 2 touchdowns to Merrimack. They needed overtime to beat Merrimack. They only beat Brown by 1 touchdown. They only beat Cornell by 1 touchdown as well. So Harvard has this one at home, which is an edge, but again, should be a close game and just a great quarterback matchup. I mean, you have Charlie Dean, who has 10 touchdowns, 2 picks, 1,150 yards. You have Brent Stenstrom, who has 1,352 yards and 6 touchdowns for Princeton. But also too, I want to bring attention to some pro prospects. At the skill positions, you have Aiden Bourget, a guy who ran for over 250 yards in 2019 against Yale. This year, he's got 608 yards in 5 games, 120 yards per game for the Harvard Crimson. Last week, had over 20 carries against Howard, just absolutely wore down that defense as time went on. And then you have Andre Yoshivas for Princeton, a guy who you shared a tweet with me with Dr. Bell from NFL Live, showing some light for Andre Yoshivas. And Yoshivas is just a great possession receiver. 31 catches, 447 yards on the year, 3 touchdowns. So again, just really great pro talent on display on a Friday night on the ESPNU, 7 o'clock Eastern, 5 p.m. Mountain Time. And even then, don't even sleep on Kim Wimberly for Harvard, who has 458 receiving yards. So much talent. This is almost like going to be like a who's who of late round NFL prospects in this game, and probably will decide the Ivy League for that matter.
Omar, you are really like pushing the train to be Ivy League Friday nights for it to become an American tradition. I don't think we're quite there yet, but we're getting there closer and closer every week. That no matter the quality of game that they put on Friday night, we're still pushing it out here on Hardware. So I appreciate
This one's a good one though. Like this one is an absolute
it. Is a good
banger.
one. It is a good one. Yeah, not all of them have been, but this is a good one. So
we'll add one more guy. Sorry, we'll add one more guy I didn't recognize. Andre Yoshivas is not the leading receiver at Princeton, believe it or not. It is Dylan Clossy, who has 30 catches for 476 yards. Like again, there's just so much talent to recognize.
sounds
I
like
don't think I could say
that talent has some, or that receiving room has some depth.
Both of them do. So should be a good game, honestly.
Absolutely, man. I will go ahead and go with my next game of the week to watch. Louisiana Monroe at Army, oddly enough, is a game to watch. Both are 2-win teams. I think both teams are starting to go into desperation mode if they drop this one, right? Look at Louisiana Monroe. Their losses are very understandable at Texas, at Alabama versus Coastal Carolina. On the road at South Alabama, who's 5-1, gave UCLA a hard game, right? We were just talking about a fake field goal away. Army, on the other hand, man, 5-score loss to Wake Forest, a loss at Coastal, which is understandable. Another 3-score loss to Georgia State. Army is locked into the Independence Bowl if they become bowl eligible. They do need to get 4 more to get that, but I feel like the path is not plausible. It's not a reasonable path if you lose a game to Louisiana Monroe. So that's my opinion. Interested to see who wins the game because, yeah, like I said, like the loser, man, it's going to be on the outside looking in as on Bulls and Booze. So they're going to tune in and we're not going to be talking about them. That's going to be painful. So.
Yeah, I know last year you had your jokes for your weekly pick against Army, and this is the first time you mentioned Army pick all year. I guess we did mention Coastal Carolina Army, but yeah, the first time in a while. But I will say this, so yeah, for Louisiana Monroe, I don't think it's panic mode for the program because I think Terry Bowden has him on an amazing track. For those of you that remember, the heights he took Akron to, he took Akron in the MAC title game, and he had them beat a Northwestern team that ended up winning the Big Ten West. And Akron didn't even make a bowl that year. So he's kind of on the same track with Louisiana Monroe, where they have one-off big games, but they've yet to put a whole season together. Last year they beat Malik Willis and Liberty at home. An amazing win for that program, but they couldn't put it together to bowl eligibility. This year, they beat Louisiana on the road for the first time since the mid 2000s. But again, you want to see like, is Louisiana Monroe going to put a whole season together for bowl eligibility? Again, I think if they don't get it this year, I think this looks like a bowl team next year. With just how open the Sun Belt is, I think Louisiana Monroe has great prospects for the future, and I think I encourage them to not give up on Terry Bowden because it's a long-term project and he's just climbing that hill slowly. You know, he's climbing the mountain. We saw Brent Brennan climb the mountain for San Jose State and like look at that. They're a consistent program now. I think there's a similar trajectory for Louisiana Monroe. And this Army game could be a huge statement because 2 years ago, 2020, it was a pandemic game, you know, it was the second week of September. Louisiana Monroe looked lifeless, 37-7 win for Army, but this is a way better Louisiana Monroe team and Army's got their work cut out for him. For Army, on the other hand, the thing with Army, because Tennessee canceled on us, which probably for the better now, you know, in retrospect. We had to schedule Villanova for a second FCS school, so now we need 7 wins. So we need to go. Let's see, they were 2-4. We need to go 6.
I didn't even catch that, but that's a good point.
All right, we have a loss to give, so I think that loss to give will either be against Air Force or Troy. Which Air Force has looked inconsistent. I think it's more realistic to think we'll beat Air Force than Troy, but even then with Troy, it's like, you know, have they dealt with the triple option, you know, in its full form? So it's like, again, the path is there, but this is a must win. Like Georgia State was it was a must win as well for comfort, but this is the must win as well as we only have one loss to give. Of course, there can also be not enough bowl eligible teams, which could be our saving grace and allow us to go bowling. At 6-6, but I would rather not count on that to be honest with you. But yeah, so a huge game for ball eligibility. My second game is gonna stay in that kind of region, but we're gonna go to Conference USA with the group of 5 for North Texas versus UTSA. And who everyone knows UTSA was gonna be a front runner for for Conference USA's title. But what about North Texas at 3-0 in Conference USA? Both teams at 3-0. There are no divisions, so this very well could be a preview of the Conference USA title game. Now, North Texas has a tougher road going down, going down the road at Conference USA as they play later on in the season. As I look up their schedule right now, North Texas has a tougher road. They'll have to play Western Kentucky, who again has looked good, not as good as last year, but they're still a contender. And they play UAB, so they have those 2 schools. But a win over UTSA could solidify them a spot in that title game as one of the top 2 teams in the conference. Going on to UTSA, you know, great team as well. We have Frank. Sorry, I'm forgetting his name. Geez, Frank Harris. We have Frank Harris, the great quarterback for North Texas, against Austin Ani. And last year, everyone knew about Sincere McCormick, what he did because of his 2020 merits. So a lot of the attention was on Sincere McCormick. But Frank Harris is having a sensational year. I mean, if he played in any other conference, if he played in the American Conference, I think he would be a Heisman candidate. You know, a Heisman dark horse. The way that we're talking about Mike Pratt, I think we'd be talking about Frank Harris if he played in the American. Austin Ani also having a great year. He has 1,692 yards, 17 touchdown passes for North Texas. And this is a guy that played minor league baseball. He's like Chris Winkie. He's like Brandon Whedon 2.0. He's like in his late 20s, having a great year for North Texas. They have a great run game. They have 2 backs with over 500 yards. They have Ayo Adeyi, which I hope I pronounced that right, a diminutive, quicker back who's averaging 8 yards a carry. And then they have Oscar Ottaway the third, who is a power back, 222 pounds, averages 5 yards a carry, 525 yards. This game should be very exciting. And yeah, we could see this again first week of December.
Absolutely, man. No, I was just thinking about it. I already can't wait for conference championship weekend. And I was like, wait, I need to slow down. I need to enjoy the few precious weeks that we have left in the regular season. I'll go with my last game of the week to watch Kansas on the road at Baylor. Something that was interesting to me last week, there was a lot of talk about Oklahoma being favored as an 8.5-point favorite over Kansas, despite Kansas looking like objectively better than Oklahoma for the beginning of the year. Then Oklahoma ended up covering, right? And definitely looking like the better team. Kansas just needs one more win to have an objectively successful season with this, right? To become bowl eligible. Baylor, on the other hand, Baylor had a lot of talk about being repeating Big 12 champions, right? Desmond Howard even picked them to go to the college football playoff. Now they're sitting at 3-3. They risk a losing record in this game and what was a beginning win at the beginning of the year, or a given win at the beginning of the year. So I'm interested to see, hey, how do both teams respond? For Kansas, this is going to set the precedent for a very tough remainder of the year. Oklahoma State at home, on the road at Texas Tech, Texas at home again, and then on the road back in Manhattan against Kansas State. And then for Baylor, what really concerns me about Baylor, your two easiest games left after this, Texas Tech and Oklahoma, are both on the road in places that are not very easy to play. So I'm very concerned for Baylor about where their season ends if they drop this one too.
Yeah, I would agree. And so like in doing my research for games to watch, I looked at Duke, Miami, of course, and I think we kind of, in terms of Kansas, it's a great story. It's a really great story, but I think we kind of oversold some of the teams that they beat earlier in the year. I mean, you look at Tennessee Tech, of course, FCS win. West Virginia. West Virginia is not a bad team, but they're a middle of the pack Big 12 team. We thought, they could be, that we thought that was like an 8-4 team or whatnot. Houston looks like a 7-5 team out of the American. And then Duke, I mean, Duke, if they don't win if they don't beat Boston College, Duke may miss a bowl game in all reality. So I think we kind of did the same thing with Kansas, and again, Iowa State too. Iowa State was another one where like Iowa State kind of reached their peak. I don't think Iowa State's that good of a program this year. Um, again, and we kind of got excited and gave Kansas some due. So again, like I mean, this Kansas team though looks to me with the remaining schedule, they look like honestly a 7-5 team. If yeah, 7-5 team, honestly, 6-6 at the very worst. But I think they do need this Baylor game at least to have that reassurance, of going bowling. But I do think that they won't be in the top half of the Big 12. But it's still a great story nonetheless. But Baylor, I'm not sure what happened to Baylor this year. They had a lot of losses, starting at quarterback. Gary Bohannon transferred, that's a huge loss in itself. The quarterback that led you to the Sugar Bowl, huge loss right there, along with many others. So again, an interesting game, and who would have thought that this would be kind of I guess, fork in the road game for both programs. I mean, you would have thought, like you said, that Kansas would have had a couple wins by now, a couple of non-conference wins, been at the bottom of the pack, and then Baylor, on their way to contending for the Big 12 title. But here we are. College football is funny. So I guess another surprising game I have for my last one coming into the year, you have Utah State versus Wyoming. I think it's the battle for the Bridger's rifle. I think that's the name of the rivalry. But you have one team. Start off with Utah State. Utah State, everything was fine and rosy last year. They had their players showing up on Jimmy Kimmel Live, before the LA Bowl, having a good time, telling jokes. Logan Bonner told a funny joke in front of the live studio audience, as a few other players did. Everything looked good for Utah State. I mean, everything looked reasonable for them to, repeat out of the Mountain West. They have probably the deepest quarterback room in the country. I think you have Logan Bonner threw for over 3,000 yards last year. You have Cooper Lega, a guy who didn't even have a snap before the LA Bowl, but ended up throwing a touchdown in his first pass ever as a collegian. Caught a pass too in the LA Bowl with lights out. And then you have Levi Williams, a guy who ran for 200 yards in the famous Idaho Potato Bowl and anchored that Wyoming offense. But they started off kind of sluggish against UConn, beating them by 11, which in retrospect looks like a very solid win on their resume. They against Alabama, you thought they would have hung around a little bit, but they got beat 55-0 against Alabama. Then the I guess the death blow for everyone's perceptions of Utah State was a 35-7 loss to Weber State at home, of course. So everyone kind of wrote Utah State off, but slowly but surely they climbed back up. They beat Air Force. They beat Colorado State for 2 wins in a row. The Air Force one was the most shocking. And before you know it, Utah State controls their own destiny in the Mountain West Mountain Division. They have Wyoming. They have this game, Wyoming. They have Utah. They have New Mexico. Then they have Hawaii, San Jose State, and Boise State. So they control their own destiny. But the thing is they probably have to win out. They can lose to San Jose State if they're not in the division, but they would need some help from Boise State to lose coming into that game for it to be a winner take all game for the Mountain West title game. Same thing applies for we're at Wyoming. Wyoming started off strong. They beat Air Force, but they kind of faltered down the stretch against really good teams, whether it be whether it be BYU losing by 2 scores to BYU, losing by 17 to Wyoming or to San Jose State. but they too control their own destiny. They have this game, Utah State. They also have Hawaii in the battle for the Paniolo Trophy, which is, it's named after Hawaiian Cowboys, for those of you that don't know. Then they have the Golden Boot game against Colorado State. They have Boise State for the second to last week of the season, and then they have Fresno State to end the year off. So again, they have one Western Division opponent that looks like a loss, but if Boise State trips up along the way, then either, Boise State, Wyoming or Boise State, Utah State looks like a winner takes all game, which means that this weekend's game will probably be an elimination game for all intents and purposes. You have two teams that play ball very differently. Wyoming, very classic. They use a fullback and everything. They have a quarterback, Andrew Peasley, a good threat on the ground. And Utah State likes to spread the ball around and throw it. Not so much this year, too, as they're down to their fourth quarterback. But somehow they're still in the Mountain West race, as last week their quarterback Bishop Davenport had a solid game off the bench. Now we'll see how he stands against Wyoming. But again, this game serves as an elimination game for the Mountain West Mountain Division.
It's a shame that we're talking about San Jose State like, oh yeah, they like might be able to drop the game to San Jose State, but they need help. Like, man, that's brutal because we had such high hopes for them. We're hoping that they could return to the Mountain West Championship. But man, it happened. So
they can. Yeah, I mean, so
they definitely can, but it's not as impressive of a showing. We're not talking New Year's Six anymore for them, and it is tough. But
I will say this, like San Jose State, they have never played a Power Five conference or Power Five opponent in a bowl game. That is very much in stake, whether it be the LA Bowl, that the Mountain West is tied to, of course, which makes a lot of sense for San Jose State to play in. They're only 5 hours away from LA. And they probably look the best out of any Mountain West team. And then you have one of the Dallas Bowls in the ESPN's possession, whether it be the Frisco, the First Responder, the Armed Forces Bowl. You can send San Jose State there to play their first ever Power Five bowl opponent. So a lot still at stake for the Spartans program wise.
No, absolutely. There is a lot to get out of the season. I want to recommend or suggest that this season is a failure, but definitely is a different conversation than it was a few weeks ago. But yeah, man. Anything else? I think that's it for me, honestly. Anything else you want to point out before we enjoy this good week of football?
No, I mean just a great week at all. I mean just definitely a great week all around. If you're nearby a game, go ahead and catch it. I'll be watching New Mexico State, San Jose State for with the family. Hour and away, so an hour away from me, 3 hours from my family. Gonna meet in the middle, but yeah, just enjoy this weekend and hopefully it'll be as good as last weekend. Because if it is, it'll be a great place to be.
Georgia State, Appalachian State, Wednesday night on ESPN2 at 7:30. Can't wait for that one as well because we have Wednesday night football now. Izzy's thrilled.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, we have it like this weekend, next week. There's a game next week. It's I think Eastern Illinois versus McNeese State. That's on a Wednesday night for whatever reason. But I love it. But yeah, I guess until then, everyone, peace, love, and soul.